There we are. We're live now. Come on in, everybody. It's Friday. It's the Democracy Stupid, and I have a fabulous conversation coming because Donna Ladd is an astounding American. A daughter of the Old South, born in Philadelphia, Mississippi, but too smart and too curious to believe the myths she grew up with. She became a journalist for a time in New York with a Village Voice before returning home and founding the Mississippi Free Press, which, her journalism has not just led to the conviction of a KKK killer, but has taught everybody that diversity is, a benefit in their state, not a burden. And that's a lesson the whole country needs. Donna, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm tickled.
So voting rights are an issue all over again. What is that? What does that look like, and what is it like where you are?
I think I would say that it's not completely dissimilar to a lot of places in many ways. There are always the political games to try to keep certain people from voting and other people voting. Obviously, we're in Mississippi and different parts of the across the nation in many places we're very concerned about what the Supreme Court's role in voting and voting laws. The things that we're the most obsessed with at the Mississippi Free Press, though, are voter access in non-sexy kind of ways that people aren't talking about all the time. We called it trusted elections. And so since 2020, one of the things that we've been doing, and particularly Ashton Pittman, our fantastic news editor that you've interviewed in the past, and his husband, Liam Pittman, we decided to fact check all of the precinct locations across 82 counties. And it's very tedious work because there's not a great system for them. And to make a very long and tedious story short, we've done it every statewide election in Mississippi. It's something no journalism has ever even tried to do here, and most people don't even pay attention to. And we have discovered a lot of errors and people going to the polls and they're not where they're supposed to be, and last minute changes. So what I would kind of say to your listeners is that a lot of times the problems that we have aren't the ones that we always think that they are, and they're not always purposeful, and they're not always partisan. And in this case, what we found is that a lot of the errors are also in Democratic counties, and Republican counties. And so, but it's very important, because if people can't feel confident in being able to vote and having access to the polls, or knowing where they are, or that they're not going to change at the last minute and there's no parking, whatever the case there might be, they may not vote. And, in elections like this year, we have a couple of really high profile elections for Congress as well as for the Senate. And, access to the polls can matter a lot, because these could end up being close elections for all we know. And especially with our demographics, right? And so these are the kinds of things that are really important, and they are not. We're not sitting here arguing that they're all partisan. That all these the problem is the system is broken, right? The system at its core is broken. Now, does that allow somebody to take advantage of it? Absolutely, if they so chose in a particular county. And so it's tedious, but that's kind of what we are about, is figuring out those systemic kinds of problems that don't seem as sexy to other media. Now I'll say this, a state law finally passed last year that made it harder to change polls within 60, or really illegal to change precinct locations within 60 days of an election. And we're very proud of that, because our work is what provided the data and the information that was needed. It's not enough.
Well, has this problem gotten worse over time, or has it been just always, look, it's hard to run elections?
Well, Ashton did a really fantastic
Mhm.
solutions piece about the
Mhm,
Pulitzer
mhm.
Center got involved last year and in the last year supported our work. And he did a solutions piece that was that really found that it's, again, it definitely has gotten, I mean, worse over time in some ways because the system itself is broken. And at the heart of it is the state saying, and the Secretary of State saying, well, this is up to the counties to give us the right information. And then, then they put out lists that are wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Well, I mean, across the country, there has been an attack on poll workers.
Mhm.
And it's been harder for people to want to volunteer to
Right.
do this kind of work. It's a bigger burden on the people who are doing it, so it's more likely that there are going to be errors.
Well, that's true. And then I think the other thing too is that I would say is that having known a lot of poll workers here, when your elections are a mess, no matter what the party of your county or, no matter what the reasons are,
Mhm.
that makes it very difficult on poll workers because people get mad at you.
Yep.
And I get that, and so this is why, we always, and this about us, we always emphasize systemic problems that
Mhm.
can they be solved so that at least in this case, in trusted elections, we're trying to take away the ability to keep people from voting, whether or not it's on purpose or not,
Mhm.
because you're also taking away that opportunity to cheat. If you're saying you can't change the poll location within 60 days of an election, that's a start
Yeah,
because
big start, big start.
and so we're still on it. I mean, this year we're kind of expanding it out and we're doing a lot of other things and really trying to dig in. Since we last talked, probably we've been busy setting up our reporting bureaus across the state, 8 bureaus. And part of the reason we're doing that is so that we can do really localized versions of this work and then offer it. We're a nonprofit, so we would
Yeah,
offer the information for free to other publications so that we are getting the word out there,
so people know where to vote.
and they know to tell us.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. If they're having voter access issues, they
Yep.
know to tell us.
Are there any other voter issues that are concerning? I mean, you mentioned the Supreme Court, and God knows that Calais decision was heartbreaking.
Oh,
I mean, the Voting Rights Act was important, not just where you live, but all over the country.
that's absolutely right. Yeah. That's I think in many ways on that one, I think our biggest fears are for the future, right? And what's going to happen as far as our voting districts and so the near future, don't get me wrong. I'm not pushing it way out, for years. I think in Mississippi, again, a lot of it, our absentee ballot rules are just a hot mess. I mean, you have to have 2 notaries to vote absentee,
Wow.
and those are, I'm not going to sit here and say that's an intentional barrier to entry, but it sure sounds
But
like
it is a barrier.
barrier to
Yeah,
entry.
it is a barrier, right?
Yeah.
Whether beavers put it there or a person
It's a
put it
little
there.
hard to
it's a
argue
barrier.
that
Yeah.
it's not intentional in some
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it, but and so, and I hate them. Our attorneys are next door in our office building. I still hate having things notarized. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I can only imagine for people who work in 2 jobs and and
No,
all
it's
of the
impossible.
things
And notaries are hard to find now.
that's right. And so I think that those kinds of just making it easier to vote.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little more direct. There have been a lot of really vocal comments over the recent years, about being, just like everywhere, but young people not knowing what they're voting for, and all of these things, like they're worried about woke young people or this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern here, just like it is around the rest of the country. Now, I will say this: one of the things that's so important about Mississippi, which I'm sure we have the highest percentage of African American population in the nation, and what people discount all the time about us, among many other things, is that if barriers are removed and controlled legally, and then and the more people have the access to vote, the motivation to vote, and the information that they need to make good decisions, which is something else I like to talk about. Not horse race journalism, red versus blue,
right? Real journalism,
but like really real information. This state could. I mean, this state is. I mean, it should be just. I say this should in the sense of sheer numbers and population and percentages. It's really a purple state. The only thing that keeps Mississippi kind of what one. I don't like all the red blue stuff and all that, but what a lot of people would call red, and this is just a math thing I'm saying here, is the fact that a lot of people don't vote for different reasons. And that's the only thing. And we here in this state, I mean, we're, we in the sense of looking at things that way without the bigotry of low expectations toward our state and the things that come along with that. I think that, we just numbers wise, we should be a swing state.
Certainly. I mean, you have your gerrymandered legislature at the state legislative level. That's harder to do. But,
well, it is, but it's also, I'm not going to let the Democrats off here because the national Democrats, have a real hard time believing that Mississippi's a swing state.
Well, there's a lot of interesting
political decisions, the strategy.
Yeah. But you have a U.S. Senate race right now that the rest of the country is actually very interested in.
Oh, I know. And hopefully
talk about that a little bit, because I don't think my listeners are that plugged in.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Colum is running as a black, the Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate against Cindy Hyde Smith. It's hard to say that Smith has ever been the strongest, I mean, politically, the safest Senate candidate in the state. Now she had defeated Mike Espy, and so I'm not saying he would have an easy road, but Scott knows a lot of people, and I happen to have. I don't know him super well, but I happen to have known him when he lived here in Jackson since he was very young. And he's been, I can say that more these days, engaged, very engaged. His father, Will Colum, is super engaged and known. And, he's out there. I think he's not, he's not being controlled. I think some things are changing with the way Democrats treat the state. I think we'll see. It usually comes out in the wash later in the campaign and the kinds of strategies that they use. But I think he, if anybody has had a shot at the Senate, probably since I have been running my journalism outlets here for almost 25 years, it's probably Scott in this race.
That'll change the way the country thinks.
I mean, I maybe, you have to prove that to me, but yeah. And so that's a race that is being closely watched, and he's out there, and he's not one of those candidates that's waiting till the last minute and going to churches or whatever. I mean, he's been out there for a long time, and I don't, obviously I don't endorse, and I don't mean any of that in this way, but certainly just kind of looking in on it, it seems like he's probably scaring some people, and on the other side of the aisle. We'll see. It's Mississippi. You got to turn out. You got to be able to have access to the polls. Your voting location needs to be where you say it is. Yeah. All of these things that I personally expect a lot of trickery in this campaign before it's all said and done. So just like we're going to see around the country. I mean,
I expect it around the country for sure. And I know I'm in Chicago where there has been trickery, and you're in Mississippi where there's been trickery. It always looks a little different depending on where you are.
Yeah.
Right. But, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, let's change the subject a little bit because you wrote this fabulous piece about our 250th birthday. And I wonder if you would talk us through some of the things you wrote about your journey and how little Americans know about us.
Yeah.
And, because it was a fabulous story.
Thank you. Well, that's an ongoing theme for me, is to pick on people in all 50 states about knowing our history fully in their own history, as well as Mississippi's. Well, what it was is that we were and I didn't say all this in the column because we're still traveling at the time, and I don't really like people to know when I'm traveling exactly. But we were driving out to California, my partner Todd Stauffer and me, and our 30th anniversary was actually going to be that next week, and we were headed to a journalism conference, and so we drove across, God bless us, West Texas. And now we've done that again, and we're done. But anyway, so it just was one of those drives where, and I write about this in the column, but we love road trips, and we both love chasing history, and we're looking up every road sign, and it's just who we are, and I talk about, being exhausted and not really thinking about, anything serious very much. And then I was looking at a paper map, and I saw Jeff Davis County, right, in West Texas. And I'm like, okay, look, I know Texas is a confederacy. I know that, but really there's a county there too, named for Jeff Davis. I didn't know that. And so anyway, we go down this rabbit hole, and people could read the column if they want. It's not hard to find. It's one of my democracy essays, meaning it's long. So in that, we figure out that this county is named after Jeff Davis, but then we kind of started just reading, it was boring. We're driving to West Texas. So I'm reading to us. And so, I didn't know, I don't know if you knew, but I didn't know that there was a Western theater in the Civil War where Jeff Davis
read about, right? That's not right.
And I obsess about this history. And so that they were beyond Texas. I mean, they had two battles in New Mexico because, as I called it, Jeff Davis's march to the Pacific. I mean, they were really trying to take the West. And what they were really trying to do is control all the like the gold mines and such, which was the money that was funding the Union, basically, in its side of the Confederacy. And so we just kind of go down these rabbit holes around that. And just kind of realizing, and I say it in the essay, how did I not know this? That, and frankly, how do people who probably live in the West, a lot of people probably don't know that, that not only that, but that we already knew that Southern Utah, big Dixie thing going on there, which I write about, and other parts of other pockets, but we just didn't know that. And so it just got me, it kind of got me rolling, then I have a lot of energy again. So, and I just keep reading it, and, and they're naming the county after him, after the president of the Confederacy, years after, like the next decade or something. And I'm like, this all gives me such a headache, and there's much more in there if people want to read that. And also I was reading about the lynchings by Texas Rangers and local lynch mobs, just like we had in Mississippi, just like you had in Chicago, and the massacres, and, and every state had lynchings, right? I think maybe one, there isn't I forget which one it is. There aren't documented lynchings. But my point is, I was reading about that and how many Mexicans were lynched, and they called it Juan Crow. And I'm like, so my point is, ultimately, if that part of it was the frustration that we as Americans, we don't know our history. And as a Southerner and as a Mississippian, my frustration is that so much of the country dumps, and I think I've said this to you before, dumps it all on the South and on Mississippi. I don't say that because I'm hard on the South of Mississippi. You know that. They dump it in the South, and they don't know their own history. There are there are monuments across this country, don't get me started, named after terrible racists that people have no idea of. Some of that's going to be in a book that I'm working on. But my point is people don't know that they need to face their own history. One of the things I thought of when I was digging out this Texas Dixie in the West, I thought of a woman one time back when I was on Twitter who, I don't know if I'd posted something about Mississippi's Declaration of Succession or whatever, but she basically came on. She's from Texas. Well, she didn't say she was from Texas.
You wrote about this. Yeah.
What?
You wrote about this. Yeah.
Oh, I did. It's in there. And she says, Mississippi. And I'm like, well, where are you from? And she said, Texas. And I'm like, have you read your own Declaration of Succession?
Mm-hmm.
No, because it's if you clicked it, it's blunter than Mississippi's, and Mississippi's is out there about the skin and the sun, and and theirs is just it lays out that it's about white supremacy and all these other things. So my point, I could go on and on, as you know, but my point is that I believe we're at a moment in history where our democracy is in peril and that because as a nation we became so complacent and thinking that, well, we got bad little pockets here and there, but as long as they don't control everything, that our democracy and our nation is going to be fine. Meantime, these forces have never gone away, and they have always been north, south, west, which is a lot of what I am working on in my bigger project. Is this, these days, I call it collaborative racism. And it was collaborative racism, highbrow, lowbrow, across the country, pretty much throughout our history, throughout the 20th century. And even when we're fighting the Nazis, eventually. And that people they've allowed, it's not everybody's fault because so much of it has been swept into closets because people don't want to talk about it. But we didn't believe it could happen here.
Well, I mean, absolutely true. We didn't believe it could happen here. Americans don't have the habit of looking at history, or ourselves, actually, that clearly. But you also have an official effort to tell us a fake history. You have the 1776 Project,
right?
And the effort to tamper with the Smithsonian and to challenge a view of history that historians and people who actually look say, well, yeah, these things really did happen. And you have a moment where the forces that are not so interested in democracy are afraid of that real history. So I go, all the more reason to tell it.
Well, that is true. And it's not a new thing. And that's one of the things I would kind of want to emphasize to everybody, that we're seeing kind of the logical progression of what has been going on for a long time. Straight through line. It never stopped. It stopped for some people, but it never stopped. And so, and like here in Mississippi, I'm going to
interrupt you for 1 second. That is so interesting. So we have our own versions up here, but like the myth of the lost cause that grew up after the Civil War is one example, but that it isn't the only example, right? Yeah, that's interesting.
That's what I mean, that it's through line. It's the myth of the lost cause. I'm glad you said that, because all the BS about the North and the South and the North, absolutely. I'm not criticizing that the North won the Civil War. Thank God. Okay. However, the reconciliation, quote unquote, of white people, that North and South, that came after that, very intentional, is so much a part of the lost cause. So it's not just a Southern lost cause, even though, our daughters of the Confederacy and all of these people that things are still named for, they were involved in that, but it was very intentional that white people came back together. And the thing that I like to say to people is that, it's not like, and I know you know this, but it will shock some people sometimes to say this. It's kind of like, and I had to face it at one point. It's not like every abolitionist, or maybe even most, or every person who was fighting for the Union to free slaves, so many of them were white supremacists. And so what we have allowed this thing to happen, and they continued to be white supremacists. A lot of them became eugenicists. How many union people, and so this is the thing. It's like it was, there's one thing to, we look at so much of our race history in our nation as the before and after slavery. And that was so important. It was that moment. But what happened after that is what put us on the trajectory we are on now. That kind of reconciliation, and then allowing the South to do what it did. And ending,
two thoughts about what you're telling me. One is that the idea that slavery is terrible and needed to be ended is one thing, but actually talking to people, meeting them, letting them into your lives, getting to know what other people are like is how we overcome these barriers. And that took America 100 years. And even then it's a slippery slope, but
Jim Crow segregation and de jure segregation.
Yeah, right.
They were both.
Absolutely right. It helped us stay apart, so we didn't get a chance to get to know each other.
Right. That's right. Segregation in the Jim Crow in the South, and then
we had it plenty here in Chicago. Still do.
I know, but everywhere across the nation that was true, and so it wasn't like people.
We're better in a lot of ways about that now. We're better, but the other thought I had goes to something very much in our political moment. And very much about what would happen if, say, you're a journalist and I'm a partisan. So, if my Democratic side wins and the threat to the democracy is averted for a moment, one of the things that people say, and Joe Biden did this, and it's a problem, is let's just put the past behind us and move on. Let's just put the past behind us and move on, right? Every time that happens, in history, not just in the United States, the forces the autocratic forces or fascist forces, I'm going to give the example in the state of Israel when a peacemaker who was Yitzhak Rabin was murdered. They were worried the society would fall apart. They said, let's just put the past behind us. The right wing ate their lunch and has ruled the country ever since, much to the horror of now the whole world. Right. So what you're saying is very hard political counsel. It is that you cannot put the past behind you.
No, you just can't. And at this point, I believe very strongly that a lot of the reasons people put the past behind them is because they don't want to face up to their own stuff, and their own family's role in that history. They just want to move on themselves. And that's, if they're white, that's the thing. This is a whiteness problem, because
in our country. Yeah.
Yes,
sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so they just, it's so common that they just want to move past it. And then we kind of open it up. I don't just say, the whole nonpartisan thing because I run a nonprofit. I really don't, with all due respect to anyone listening, I don't like partisanship and I don't like parties. And I'm fond of saying, as I know too much about the history of parties and the switcheroos all over the place and what can happen. But I do think what I will say is certainly there are some parties at moments in history that are better than other parties. And I don't take away from that. What I will say is that a two-party system, don't get me started, because we are so binary in this country.
Yes, I concur with you. And I think one of the things we will have to do in the future is think about proportional representation and multi-member districts, just a different solution, because the political solution we have right now drives everybody to.
Well, we're partly where we are because of this binary bullshit. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
that's
just,
right. That's right.
and so,
And winner take all. It's yeah,
electoral college, I mean, and, set up to benefit slave, owners
yeah,
or wealth,
yeah. I mean, the country is in agreement about most things.
yeah,
You look at polls, we really are, as a nation, if you just ask people, forget the politics, what
yeah,
do you think about, should we release the Epstein files? Should we be at war in Iran? Should we make it easier to build housing and not have so many, rules and regulations in the way so we can't do it? Or should billionaires rule the world? I mean, mostly Americans agree about a lot of things. There are places where we surely do disagree, and the politics that we have aims at finding those areas where we disagree, rather than the areas where we do agree. And the areas where we do agree are huge, but they can't seem to create a political apparatus that ropes them all together for long enough to make a difference.
Well, and I think we go back to history too, or just knowledge of how things got the way they are, so many, I don't know, how do I put that? It's like we don't understand that history of, white people coming together at these moments that are basically essentially protecting the power structures, right? And so, and agreeing to, let's just not talk about, Americans' role in the Holocaust, all of these things. It's like, let's just throw all of that stuff in the past so that, or eugenics. And then you get to the point of, vice presidential candidates standing up talking about birth rates, and people have no idea
where that comes from.
Really pulls up, or so many people don't.
Yeah.
And what the dangers are in that kind of conversation, because it maybe they think, well, they want more white people, which is true, but what else can come with that, because they don't really understand that, yes, these things can happen in America.
Well, I mean, the birthright citizenship argument, that was a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court. And, I keep with me and I read this little book with some frequency, and it is pretty clear about this. But apparently 4 justices couldn't see that. But if it's not by birth, then who gets to decide? Then somebody gets to decide you don't have the protections of being a U.S. citizen? Wow.
Yes. I mean, all of that. I mean, everything you just said, it's like all of these things, if you remove these guardrails, or which we're seeing a lot of guardrails are being moved in this Supreme Court. And now some of us have warned about the Supreme Court for a long time. And I expect you're one of them.
I have as well. Yep.
And what could actually happen. And, we're I guess I have to say this. It's like so many Americans are caught up in this exceptionalism thing where these things can't possibly happen here. And then they're shocked when they do. Some of us have been out here studying history and, looking up towns on counties on maps and all these things for a long time, and know they can happen here. And we've been warning them and they won't believe us. I mean, I go back to, the 2016 election, and the things that people would say to me who were, Democrats would say, or people who are supporting Bernie Sanders, just having no concern and being so angry at me because I had a concern about the Supreme Court. No concern about that, or no concern even about, it really concerns me if we try to turn every conversation into class rather than race, because that means we're burying a lot of stuff, right? Or we're equalizing what white people have been through with what Black people. Now, but I've also written a lot, as you know, about growing up poor white, and, kind of the framing of how we need to be actually listening and talking to a lot of people, but without giving into these other things. I don't think it's an either or. You just talk about class, you just talk about race, right? If that makes sense.
Complicated history.
It's complicated, and
we're a
we
big,
have to
diverse
treat it
country.
that way.
We have, well, I'm not sure we could have created a simpler history with a big, diverse, complicated place grappling with the best and the worst of humanity every day. I mean, you've talked about how white America has come together several times for ill. They've also come together for good sometimes. And, I mean, it's an amazing thing that happens. And where we make the most progress is when groups have come together for one reason, suddenly discover that groups who came together for a completely different reason have common cause. I think back to the civil rights movement was not a dominant movement until it got linked with the Vietnam War protests, and they had nothing to do with each other. They weren't. I mean, the Vietnam War protests were white college kids. The civil rights fight was primarily led by blacks in your part of the world. The anti-war stuff was more in my part of the world. Somehow they found common ground and made real progress together. That's the kind of thing that common ground doesn't last very long, but if we find it for a little while, we can get a lot done.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is that because, a lot of what we do is look for common, complicated ground in what we do in Mississippi. In other words, we're just not gonna throw in with a group, any group that, that are trying to do good things, but they're trying to sweep all these other things under the carpet. I don't think we have to give in to that. And I think Americans often do give in to that. Like this idea of, okay, we're not going to talk about that because that's going to, that's going to upset the wrong people or whatever.
Oh, so yes, all the time. Like, okay, we can talk maybe about we should have fair elections, but God forbid we should talk about those young women who were raped by Jeffrey Epstein, right? That's the kind of thing that is around all the time because we will upset those powerful people, but we need to do both. We need to say these are important conversations we all need to have.
Well, and you're right. I mean, I think, and as a woman, and you probably know, I've written about my own sexual assault and kind of used it in this one essay about Epstein to frame a bunch of things. But, growing up as a woman, it's still really hard to be a woman. And I'm white, and it's hard to be a woman. It's hard to speak out. I do it. Obviously, it's fine, but I have to own my own thing to do it or run my own thing. And it's hard to challenge things. It's hard to actually get justice when it comes to sexual abuse and pedophilia and all these things. I mean, people just don't want to talk about it. And so I think a lot of women, in the case of Epstein, especially, forced it to its power in numbers. And so we need a lot of power in numbers across the board, and where people, and there's still too much, there's plenty of sexism among all political parties.
No one owns that.
Right. No. And, and I've been on the receiving end of that in our state from Democrats who, because I won't, kind of just go along with the program or I fact check something that their candidate says. Oh, I'm like, I'm not a part of it. I mean, I'm not here to do that. I'm a journalist. And so I'm here to tell the truth, as is my team. But then they have to pile it on, and they kind of try to make it sexist, or they try to go spread stuff about you, or they try to kill your funding. Oh, the book I'm going to write about all this when I actually succeed. And I got probably naming names, and I got a whole drawer of evidence. So it's like just the things that they try to do to kind of hush you up, and that's the wrong.
No wrongdoers. Don't mess with journalists. They actually keep records.
Well, we know how to keep records, and we know how to check on you and find out things. That's absolutely true. But it's like we still have we have so much sexism in politics nationally still. I mean, we're seeing some improvements around that, but I think and access and women, I laugh because I write these fairly long democracy essays, usually not over 3,000 words. But, there's this whole thing within journalists and women journalists where we don't get paid to write 10,000 word essays.
I know.
No matter how good we are, or
Mhm,
how
mhm,
engaging our essays are,
mhm.
all of that is just, that's wrong. And,
I mean,
someone
yeah.
like you, I appreciate, because you'll bring me on here to say any damn thing I want to,
Look, I don't want to make light of this at all. I really don't. And I was crushed after the last general election. But the idea that a Black woman, without the benefit of a primary, coming after an unpopular president, came within inches of winning. I mean, got more votes than anybody could have imagined at any other time. I view that as a remarkable achievement for all of us.
I mean, it is, but
Wish she'd won, but it's a remarkable achievement.
well, it is. I mean, I also look at it, maybe this is slightly more negative. I also look at it as like, two women who, I have also been critical of Hillary Clinton. So, I say this
right.
with due respect,
But
but
certainly
two
qualified
women who are very qualified for those
Absolutely right.
positions.
Lost to the same
Exactly. But then,
criminal.
then you had a man in between who, I mean, those are the kinds of things women and girls see. It's like, how can you do this? How can you break into this kind of upper crust when you are very smart, very you do so many things right, and then that happens. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's like, wow, we've got a lot of work to do still. Some of that's the binary, and all the things that we've been talking about has a lot to do with those things as well. But and if you say certain things, God help us, the things that it's so hard for people who are not white men to say out loud without being branded with all sorts of things to this day. And a lot of it comes from the left. I'm not going to lie.
We have to be tougher. I mean, look, what comes out of the mouths of some of the folks, I don't know, in the White House, right, are so appalling, and it seems not to disqualify them. I mean, it certainly morally disqualifies them, but they got the jobs. I think on the other side, say what you mean, speak what you believe, and if somebody goes after you for it, own it. Don't say, well, I didn't quite mean it. Like, own it. And I think some of that criticism will fall down. It's like, anytime you see a bully, just, no, sorry, this is where we are. If you don't like it, go do something else.
Well, I'm going to say something here. It's like, I kind of think we're going through something we have to go through. And right now, and when I say that, I mean, having our democracy or a republic on the line.
Yep.
Because we kind of, as a nation, let it get here.
Yes, we
did.
That
goes back full circle to the things I wrote about in the essay. We were complacent or naive because we weren't taught certain things, whatever. There's a list of reasons, and I'm not beating us all up. I mean, this is just, it is. And so we have to go through what's in front of us. And in a way, that's what I was writing. I was ultimately, because the essay ultimately is kind of trying to be positive.
Very positive about America.
Yeah.
Very positive.
Because we saw this fireworks display, and that was really true that happened. And we're like, whoa. Yeah. And that it actually kind of restored my thing, my spirit, right? And I do think what we have to do right now is go through this, and that's really terrible because it's going to hurt.
Well, we have to get
a lot of people.
We don't have to just go through it. We have to get through it. We have to get through it,
but we also have to go.
Yes, I agree. The journey matters.
the journey matters.
Yep.
And so it's why, like, I decided to write start this series of democracy essays, because I fully believe the outcome last fall was going to happen just like it did the first time. And it's because of the South and the history and the things that happened to know.
I mean, you and I talked right before that election, and
yeah. And I believe that. And so I was thinking that before this election, and that's when I started the democracy columns. But part of what I'm saying is that we've got to know things. We got to learn it. We got to know and stop being glowy-eyed about where we are. If somebody's living in a blue state, wake up. It's like, figure out what's going on around you. Y'all don't have it all figured out, I promise. And you're not teaching everything that you need to be teaching to your kids for the future, I promise. I mean, maybe there's a handful, in the schools and institutionally, right? And so what I'm saying is that we got to go through it. But the thing is, to me, and I believe we're going to get through and we're going to save our democracy. However, we got to do more than save it.
Well, that goes to what we were talking about before. After we do, we can't just say, let's make a deal. Let's ignore what we just went through.
We've got to change it.
Yep.
We've got to change how women are treated. We got to change how people of color are treated. We've got to change the lack of access to real history and real storytelling. I'm in journalism. We are working very hard to change this whole horse race journalism thing. We truly center people, and truly center the people of Mississippi, and not just this. We're not just interested in talking to politicians, no matter what party they are. So these kinds of things, we have to take our own postage stamp. There's always a Faulkner reference, but anyway, we've got to take our own postage stamp, and we have got to figure out how. I think we should think about it now. What does it look like when we get to the other side of the threats to democracy? We cannot go back to status quo. And because if we do, it just keeps happening.
It keeps happening. We are out of time. We were out of time a while ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
No, Donna, it's a real pleasure. Just tell people where they can find your democracy writing.
Sure. If you go, the first thing to do is to go to MississippiFreePress.org. And that's our website for the Free Press. And, there's a lot of people there. We have 8 reporters, so it's a lot more people than me that are doing great work there.
Very good reporters.
They are very good reporters. And most are from Mississippi. And then at the top, you'll see that there's opinion. And then you can just kind of pull down, or essays, whatever it says. You can pull down from there and find the essays, or just put Donna Ladd and democracy essays into Google, and I think it probably will pop up. But
yeah, and if you read them, you will enjoy them. They're terrific. Donna, thank you. I really appreciate your taking the time today.
I always enjoy talking to you, Edwin. Thank you so much.
Bye.